Phil Dixon, and I am coming to you live here with a Sunday edition of This Day in African American Baseball History. And of course, this is the November 2nd, 2025 edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I come on almost daily and I will give historic facts related to African American baseball players that happen on a particular day. Of course, today is November the 2nd. And so with that, I also give commentary on things that I've learned from my many years of being connected to this history, which is over 45 now. So you can imagine this, guys. I'm one of the reigning historians on this topic. And I've done a lot of scholarship over 45 years and still working very hard to produce history that you're going to enjoy, okay? And of course, today I'm wearing my Kansas City Monarch uniform, and I'm doing that for a reason, because I'm going to talk about a Monarch player who actually wore this uniform in a game he played for the Kansas City Monarchs. And so let's go immediately and get started. And once again, if you like what I'm doing here, guys, I'm not here telling jokes. I don't have any girls dancing in the background. I'm just giving you straight out history. And it's baseball history. And so we want to talk about that. Now, before I get into this day, I've got to give a congratulations to the Dodgers for winning the World Series. And I did want to discuss a play. I coached for 35 years, and I've kind of watched this play closely from different angles. And that was actually both teams had the bases loaded with one out, and neither one scored. But I was particularly interested in Toronto's play because it was a matter of inches that they missed the opportunity to win the World Series. And baseball is a game of inches. And I've always stressed that with my players that, a lot of games are decided, 1 or 2 feet from a bag or whatever. So anyway, one of the things I wanted to mention was the play in the late innings when the Toronto player slid home, and of course the catcher took his feet off the plate and then put it back on. But the interesting part of that is in baseball there's a thing called a secondary lead, and especially with the bases loaded, you have to be coming home. So you want to get a good secondary lead, and I think the base runner they had in there didn't look that experienced. I don't know what his history is. I'm going to check a little deeper into how often he pinch ran. But he came in to be a pinch runner, but his secondary lead was awful. He was almost flat-footed. If you look at the footage, and there'll be different angles on this, and they will be discussing this for some time. So it looks like Toronto could have won that World Series by a matter of inches. That's how the game of baseball is played. So if you go back and you analyze that, especially if you're a coach, you want to make sure your team, your guys are getting good secondary leads. And of course, it's all related to of how the pitcher, delivers the ball, when he delivers the ball, whether he's in the stretch or the windup, that kind of thing. But secondary leads are very important. And had he had a secondary lead of maybe 1 or 2 more steps, the pennant would be in Toronto instead of Los Angeles. So that's how the old ball bounces. And so anyway, as a coach, you're always watching these kind of things, and you want to show this to your players because it makes a big difference in winning and losing. So once again, I want to take my hat off to the Dodgers who won their consecutive World Championship. And then it also made me think about someone who I talked about here earlier in the month, actually late last month, because I was appearing in Pittsburgh, Kansas, where his college was, and that was George Sweat, who played on the Chicago American Giants, who actually won back-to-back pennants. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that and just talk a little bit about baseball here and go from there. So actually, George Sweat played in 4 World Series, back to back to back to back. So that's what I wanted to say, the 4 World Series. That's I wanted to stress that. And so anyway, that does it for my current activities. And let's go to some historic activities. So once again, if you like what I'm doing, be sure and hit that subscription button. All right, let's go to November 2nd, 1931. James Biz Mackey, pinch hitting for Haas Walker. Tripled to center field, scoring Larry Brown and Dewey Creasy in the ninth to help the Royal Giants to a 7-6 win over San Diego in California Winter League action. Vic Harris scored the winning run in the 11th inning. Man, this game is loaded with all kind of names I could talk about. Vic Harris scored the winning run. Dorothy Harris, Vic's wife, was a big fan of mine, and we corresponded many times. And she always was very supportive of my work and wanted me to continue. And I was in my 20s at this particular time, just getting started. But she kind of noticed how serious I was. Who knows? Maybe she thought I'd still be around 46 years from now talking about her husband. Who knows? But anyway, Vic Harris. Vic Harris was on the ballot this last year, 20. Let's see that I'm trying to make sure. Okay, so it would have been 2024, December 2024, to be a member of the Baseball Hall of Fame. He did not get in. John Donaldson was also on that ballot. He didn't get in. And so I'm getting very concerned about the African American players' placement and how they are being considered. And I hope that maybe someone would have a person like me on that committee who can really challenge the knowledge of the people that they're bringing in and educate them as well. So what they do is, they'll bring in a player like, say, maybe they might bring in Joe Torre. Nothing against Joe Torre. But what does Joe Torre know about the Negro Leagues? Joe Torre can come in and vote on John Buck O'Neill because he actually saw him. But when you start going back to people like Vic Harris or John Donaldson, you need somebody who can educate people and educate them quickly and compare their totals to the other guys who are on the Hall of Fame list to see if you can get them inducted. And I'm afraid that they're not getting enough of that. You almost have to roll up your sleeves and be combative to make this history of these people known. And I don't think they want that. I guess they want harmony and peace and no African American players put into the Hall of Fame, and that's what you're getting. So anyway, that's my own spin on that. But I feel like Vic Harris should have been in, and of course, Biz Mackey is in. He got in 2006, and of course, I can make a good argument for Larry Brown because Larry Brown isn't even in the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame. Now that's a joke, and I would even go as far as to say two catchers. Larry Brown and Bruce Petway, both of them from Tennessee, that should be in at least the State Hall of Fame. Guys, there's so much work that needs to be done. This is ridiculous. But we have to do the work, and we have to do the scholarship. And people like myself and you who are listening here, who are interested in this topic, you need to be talking about it. You need to write letters. You need to correspond with people. And don't wait till it's time to vote on the Hall of Fame. You got to do it now. All right. Okay, so that was November the 2nd, 1931. Let's go to another one. November the 2nd, 1967. Boy, that's quite a leap there. Frank Wickware, former pitcher for many Negro League teams, died in Schenectady, New York. Man, Frank Wickware. I talk about Frank Wickware, another guy I think has a very serious chance at the Hall of Fame. He has the credentials, no doubt about it. Frank Wickware was outstanding. Walter Johnson said that he thought that Frank Wickware was a better pitcher than Christy Mathewson. Just imagine that. Mathewson walked in the Hall of Fame. Frank Wickware, we're trying to get him publicity. Earlier this year, I was in Schenectady, New York, and I wanted to bring attention to Frank Wickware. So I spoke in his hometown of Girard, Kansas. And I asked the mayor before getting there and the librarian to give me a jar of soil from Girard, which they did in my presentation. It was awarded to me. They had a nice, beautiful jar with a ribbon on it, that kind of thing. I packed that in my luggage. And then the next week I was scheduled to speak in Cooperstown, but I scheduled an event to speak in Albany, which is bumped right up against Schenectady, if you know that part of the country. So I spoke at Albany, I think maybe on a Thursday night, And then on Friday, we went to Frank Wickware's gravesite, and I sprinkled that soil over Frank Wickware's monument in the cemetery, and then gave a brief history of him. We had a nice small crowd, but they were there, and then I sprinkled that soil. And because he was a military veteran, also, I had my trumpet with me. And most of you, if you follow me, you know I play trumpet. So I played taps at his gravesite, and we got some good publicity. He received some outstanding publicity in the local newspapers, the Albany newspapers, Schenectady, and I shared that online. But it got Frank Wickware back into the limelight. Let's don't stop talking about this guy. Let's continue to talk about Frank Wickware. All right. So that's one thing we'll go. I speak of Frank Wickware often, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on him tonight. And then let's see, we'll go to one here. Maybe some of you remember this. November the 2nd, 1974. Hank Aaron traded from the Atlanta Braves to the Milwaukee Brewers for outfielder Dave May and pitcher Roger Alexander. I remember I saw Dave May play. I don't remember Roger Alexander. Don't remember much about him. I have to check and see what kind of career he had. But we all know about Hank Aaron, Hammer and Hank, Henry Aaron. The interesting thing was he had played most of his career, of course. He had played all his career in the National League. So they're bringing him to the American League. And I remember a fellow musician of mine, he was also a big baseball fan, played trumpet. We were in the same group. And so we wanted to go out and see Hank Aaron for the first time. So we get to the ballpark and, they're doing batting practice and everything like that. When game time came, he didn't play. So I missed my one opportunity to see Henry Aaron in action. However, years later, I did meet him, and he signed a picture for my son who was attending Fisk University at that time and couldn't get there. And so I took a photograph with him, and who knows, maybe I'll post that on this November 2nd app as I share it, probably through my Facebook or maybe through my X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. All right, so that's Hank Aaron. All right, then, and okay, let's go to another one here. I'm going to jump backwards to November 2nd. This is 1916. Now, the reason I'm doing this because I always end with what I call coming and goings. Now, that's a player that's either born or died on this date. So this right here is a coming, and it's a Fran Matthews is born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he was a first baseman. And he spent 20 years. Now, I can talk about his baseball, and it's great. It's great. And the reason I'm wearing this because this same uniform he wore 1941 when he played first base for the Kansas City Monarchs when they integrated Fenway Park. The first time a black professional team had played in Fenway Park, 1943, was the Kansas City Monarchs. And I think they played some local team. It was not another league opponent. But Fran Matthews did suit up and he wore his uniform, so I want to give him kudos today. And his son Daryl follows me, by the way, so hello, Daryl. So anyway, the first baseman, Fran Matthews, this is what I want to share with you. He spent 20 years in the U.S. Army, serving in the Korean War and also the Vietnam War, where he received a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star. Now, he was released in 1972 at Fort Riley, Kansas, and that's home of the Big Red One. And the Big Red One has had me down there to speak to officers in training several times. So I've been on that base several times, and somewhere in my closet I have a baseball bat that was presented to me by the Big Red One, and I'm pretty proud of that. And so he was mustered out in Kansas after 20 years, and let's see. That's kind of what I want to talk about Fran Matthews, because when I first started doing this history of the Negro Leagues, you could find that Jackie Robinson had served some time in the military, but most of the guys, you didn't know any military history of these players. So a lot of that has changed. That information is readily available for a lot of guys now, but not all the guys. So the work continues. And then every war, we were there. You got people like C.I. Taylor being in the Spanish-American War. Got all kind of guys. Frank Wickware was in World War One. Then we have World War Two. Has a lot of people, but we don't have a lot of guys who played in the Negro Leagues or played with the Negro League team as early as 1943 who appeared in Vietnam. That makes Fran Matthews an exception to the rule. And that's the reason why we need to talk about him. And then when I interviewed Fran, out in Los Angeles, that's where he was living, the latter part of his career, I would go out there. Sammy Haynes would always invite me out there, and Merle Porter, I used to talk to him quite a bit. I was several people out there that I talked to on a regular basis. And so anyway, Fran was one of them, and he was quite proud of his military career. And here's the other thing: when I know there's a big movement afoot for to create monuments where baseball players are buried, and so usually what they're doing is they'll put on their baseball history. But I remember interviewing a guy. I'm going to say Professor Lowell. He was with the Memphis Red Sox in the 20s. I interviewed him. And when I asked him, I said, how do you want to be remembered? Baseball wasn't a part of it. He wanted to be remembered as a Christian man. And he wanted to be remembered for his academic career. But the guys who are putting these monuments, they only take one thing in consideration: what he did as a baseball player. And guys, that is a major oversight when you're making these monuments. Just want to point that out to you, because if you don't know these people, you don't know their family, and all you want to point to is that they played baseball, guys, I think that's short-sighted in my point of view, all right? These people were far more well-rounded than we ever want to give them credit for. All right, then. And a lot of college guys, too. And so if you go check in their academic career, you find out what they were interested in. Professor Lowe was the reason they called him professor, because he was a teacher for a number of years, many years. His life was being a teacher. Okay, so that's one. And also, I want to talk about someone. Okay, that was a coming. Okay, let's go to another coming. Okay, and that's Clinton Butch McCord. He was born in Nashville, Tennessee. Had the pleasure of interviewing him on many occasions, and he hit 392 in the Mississippi-Ohio Valley League with 394 at-bats, almost 400, guys. But this guy never appeared on a major league roster. In his minor league career, he finished with a lifetime 300-something batting average, but he was a great player. But every place he went, he never got the credit for being as good a talented ball player as he was. So that's Clinton Butch McCord. And I was going through some information here, and this is a file I have on him. This is the file on him, the Clinton Butch McCord file. And some of the things I interviewed with him go back to 1987. And one particular story I was very interested in, because in here he talks about, 1958 season. And this is what he told me. Now, because I was an African-American guy, a young guy, people would talk to me more candid than they did when maybe a white writer came along. I'm just telling you the truth, guys. They would talk to me more candid. So I was able to get information that people typically did not get who were writing their books and things like that. And I just called them and told them they could pick up that I was a fan, that I was serious, and they knew I was African-American. When I meet them, sometimes other players would tell them about me. And so I would get all kinds of stories. And so I remember talking to Clinton McCord, and he told me that in Myrtle Beach, that he saw his first ever, okay, you know how they had segregated restrooms. So you go down south and they have a men's, women, and a colored restroom. 3 restrooms. Can you imagine that? 3 restrooms. Now you go in some of these places, they've got 1 restroom. So anyway, he was telling me about 3 restrooms, and he said he went to Myrtle Beach, and in Myrtle Beach, he saw his first ever segregated payphone. Think about that. What in the hell is a segregated payphone? You just gotta look. I'm still trying to digest that, even all these years later. A segregated payphone. So I guess you're black, you couldn't use this phone because white people were using it, even though they weren't in the booth at the same time. So anyway, he thought that was odd, and he remembered it, and he remembered the place where he saw it, which is interesting. And then he also talked to me about in Augusta, Georgia. He said he played now. Clinton played first base, and he said there was a section which they called the Ku Klux Klan section, and he said he heard some of the most foul language he had ever heard coming out of that section directed right at him. This is a guy who just wanted to play baseball. That's all. Just wanted to play baseball, but he had to endure all of this, and just to play baseball. And he told me about a pitcher that you know how they you could warm up on the sideline. They have like a little bullpen, and he said the language was so bad down the sideline that the pitcher wouldn't warm up down there. He warmed up on the mound. So he had to get in the middle of the field to warm up because he wouldn't warm up on that sideline because of the cruelty of the language that was coming from that area. But McCord told me this story. He said at the end of the season in 1958 for Macon, they had a most popular player contest, and the gift was $100 and a stereo. And he said when the announcer announced that Charles Sorisi, Soraci, was the winner, and he was a white guy, a lot of fans were upset. So he said there was a white guy in the stands, and he began passing a hat around to collect money for Clinton. And he said he passed the hat around, and finally someone from the Dodgers organization, who this was Clinton played in the Dodgers organization that year, he stepped in and said, hey, you can't do that. So after the game, the guy stopped. So after the game, he came down to the clubhouse and he presented Clinton with the money. And he said, Clinton said there was $70 in the hat. The guy didn't even get halfway around the park. He didn't get very far, but he already had $70. Remember, the prize the team was giving him was $100. So he had $70. And the guy was real honest, white guy. He said, you know, you're the best player, but the reason you didn't win was because you were a N-word. And that's what McCord told me this story. So I went back and I said, okay, well, how close were these guys in batting? Well, I can tell you, the Sorisi had 170 hits. McCord had 153. And but the other guy had 24 doubles, and McCord had 37. And McCord also hit 10 home runs, and the other guy hit 4. And the other guy had 66 RBIs, and McCord had 81. So whoever thought that he was the best player on the team could make a good argument. So I'm going to end with one more today, and it's October. Let's see, it's November 2nd, 1996, and this is someone who passed away, and it was Marcelina Tony Stone passed away in Alameda, California. And I happen to know Tony Stone. And I don't know how many people actually knew Tony Stone. And there's several books about Tony Stone, but I think that those people never had a chance to meet her. I had talked to her in the early 80s, and she had been exceptionally tough to find because she had gotten married and she had a new last name. And a lot of the players, even Buck O'Neill, who helped me quite a bit, he didn't know where she was. I reached out to people with the clowns, couldn't find her. But as more information about the Negro League started to come out in the 90s, she surfaced. And then I immediately reached out to her and talked to her. She was always angry at Buck O'Neill because she felt like he didn't give her a chance to really show what she could do. And so she was kind of unforgiving on that. Interesting lady, though. One of the guys who doesn't get much credit for bringing her out is a guy named Harry Crump. Harry Crump was out of the Twin Cities, and Harry Crump is a guy that really brought her out and got her playing baseball at a higher level, and he was well connected, and he ran a hotel there. And so Harry Crump also operated a basketball team. I like to say something about Harry Crump at some point when we get around his birthday or something like that. I know a lot about Harry Crump and who he was married to and that kind of thing. So anyway, Tony Stone, and you can get books on her. and I was honored to meet her. Uh, I met her finally after years of conversation in Los Angeles. And the interesting thing about that was I had my camera. Back then, we didn't have all these cell phones, all this technology. So I had my little Kodak 110 camera. And so I took a picture of her, but foolishly, I didn't have someone take a picture of me and her together. So I have that picture of her out in Los Angeles when I was speaking there. This is probably, I want to say this might have been 1993, 94, maybe 95. So she didn't live much longer after our interaction, but she is definitely someone that you want to know about. So anyway, guys, that kind of does it for me today. This is a look back at November 2nd in Black baseball history, African American baseball history, whatever you want to call it. And I want to thank everyone for joining and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about some other plays I saw in the World Series that might be of interest to you. So this is Phil Dixon. If you like what I'm doing, guys, go ahead and subscribe, and I would appreciate that. I'm going to come back, keep bringing you information from someone who didn't get this stuff out of books. I actually lived this history, and a number of these people I did talk to. And okay, so I do want to give a shout out to Doris Brown, who's kin to Larry Brown, who also follows me, and I want to make sure that I let her know that I appreciate her support. And we're going to do more for Larry, see if we can't get him in the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame. Thank you. You have a nice day, everybody.